The last time my ex-wife laughed at me, she stood in front of more than 100 guests, pointed at my old beige sedan, and said,
You actually drove that here?
Everyone laughed. Even the valet looked embarrassed to take my keys. I simply smiled, because Chloe had no idea that before the day was over, she would regret laughing at that old car more than anything she'd ever done. If you've ever been judged because of what you drive, what you wear, or what people thought you were worth, subscribe to the channel. This story is for you. My name is James Smith. But to understand why Chloe laughed that afternoon, you have to go back 6 years. Back to a time when neither of us cared about expensive cars. Because back then, we only cared about each other. 6 years earlier, I met Chloe Clark on a rainy Thursday afternoon. I wasn't looking for love. I was 28 years old, working as a senior mechanical engineer for a manufacturing company in Chicago, while quietly sketching business ideas every night after work. My life followed the same routine every single day. Work, home, dinner, business plans, sleep, repeat. Romance wasn't part of the schedule. Then one rainy afternoon, everything changed. The coffee shop across from my office was unusually crowded because of the weather. Every table was occupied except for one. I carried my coffee toward it at the exact same moment someone else did. We both reached for the chair. "Oh," she smiled. "I'm sorry." "No, that's my fault." We both laughed. "I'm Chloe." "James." She looked toward the rain-covered windows. "Looks like we're sharing the table." "I don't mind." "Neither do I." That conversation lasted almost 2 hours. Long after our coffee had gone cold, we talked about books, travel, childhood memories, our families, music, dreams. When the rain finally stopped, neither of us wanted to leave. Before walking away, she smiled and asked, "So, are you always this easy to talk to?" "Only on Thursdays." She laughed. "I'll remember that." 3 days later, we had our first date. It wasn't expensive. No luxury restaurant. No rooftop lounge. Just a small family-owned Italian restaurant where the owner greeted nearly every customer by name. Halfway through dinner, the lights suddenly went out. The entire neighborhood lost power. Instead of leaving, the restaurant owner lit candles on every table. People began clapping. Someone started playing an old guitar. Chloe looked at me and laughed. "I think this is the most romantic power outage I've ever experienced. I'll have to arrange another blackout for our second date." She laughed so hard she nearly spilled her drink. That laugh, back then, it was my favorite sound in the world. Over the following months, we became inseparable. She celebrated every little victory with me. When I received a promotion at work, she surprised me with my favorite homemade dinner. When she earned her marketing certification, I filled her apartment with balloons before she came home. Neither of us had much money, but somehow, life felt incredibly rich. About a year later, I proposed. Not on a yacht, not in Paris, not in front of hundreds of strangers. Just the two of us, by Lake Michigan at sunset. I was so nervous that I almost dropped the ring into the water. She laughed through happy tears. "James, you've always been adorably clumsy." I knelt anyway. "Will you marry me?" She didn't hesitate. "Yes." Before I could even stand up, she wrapped her arms around me. I would have said yes even without the ring. That became one of my favorite memories. A few months later, we got married in a small garden surrounded by family and close friends. Nothing extravagant. No celebrity venue. No luxury decorations. Just people who genuinely loved us. After the ceremony, my best man tossed me the car keys. "Your carriage awaits." Everyone laughed. Our carriage was a used beige sedan we'd bought together just 3 weeks earlier. It wasn't beautiful. It wasn't fast. But it was ours. Chloe kissed the dashboard before we drove away. Our first family car. I smiled. Hopefully not our last. She looked out the window. "Promise me something." "What?" "No matter how successful we become." She intertwined her fingers with mine. "Let's never forget days like this. I promise." That old sedan witnessed almost every happy memory we created. It took us on our first road trip to Wisconsin. It carried us home after our honeymoon. It sat outside our first tiny house with the white picket fence Chloe had always dreamed about. On Sunday afternoons, we'd drive for hours with no destination, singing terribly to old songs on the radio. Sometimes we'd stop by the lake, buy 2 ice creams, and watch the sunset from inside the car, because we didn't want the moment to end. Looking back, those weren't the days when we had the most money. They were the days when we were the happiest. One evening, while we sat inside that same old sedan overlooking the city lights, I finally gathered the courage to tell Chloe about the dream I'd carried for years. "I don't want to spend the rest of my life working for someone else." She turned toward me. "What do you want to do?" "I want to build my own engineering company." She stayed quiet. Not because she doubted me, but because she wanted me to finish. "I know it won't happen overnight," I said. "It could take years. It could fail. I might have to start over more than once." I looked down at my hands. "I'm asking you to believe in something that doesn't exist yet." She reached across the center console and gently took my hand. Then she smiled the same smile that had made me fall in love with her. "James, if I only believed in things I could already see, I never would have fallen in love with you." I felt my throat tighten. She squeezed my hand. "If your dream takes 1 year, I'll be there. If it takes 5 years, I'll still be there. If it takes 10 years, she leaned over and kissed my forehead. "We'll get there together." That night, sitting inside our old beige sedan beneath a sky full of stars, I believed her. And with all my heart, I believed nothing would ever come between us. When I think back to those years, people always ask me the same question. When did everything start falling apart? The truth is, it didn't happen all at once. No betrayal, no screaming, no affair, no dramatic fight that changed everything overnight. Our marriage slowly slipped through our fingers, one ordinary day at a time. A month after our honeymoon, I officially registered my engineering company. It wasn't much, just a tiny rented office above an old hardware store on the west side of Chicago. The walls were bare. The carpet had seen better days. The furniture came from second-hand stores. My desk wobbled every time I leaned on it. But when I unlocked that office for the first time, it felt like I was opening the door to my future. That evening, Chloe surprised me with a small chocolate cake. She had written the company name in blue icing, Smith Industrial Solutions. "It's not much," she said with a smile. "It's perfect." She lit one candle. Every great company started with one first day. We laughed as we cut the cake using plastic forks, because we hadn't even bought real plates for the office yet. Those were beautiful days. Every evening, she'd stop by after work. Sometimes she'd bring dinner, sometimes coffee. Sometimes she'd simply sit across from me reading a book while I worked. Just knowing she was there made the long nights easier. Whenever I apologized for staying late, she'd smile. "One day, we'll laugh about these nights." I believed her. So did she. The first 6 months gave us hope. I landed a small manufacturing contract. Then another. Nothing life-changing, but enough to pay the bills. Enough to make us believe we were moving forward. Then, the first setback arrived. A major client cancelled a project only 3 days before signing the contract. Months of preparation disappeared with one phone call. I remember staring at my computer screen long after the office had emptied. When I got home, Chloe noticed immediately. "It didn't happen, did it?" I shook my head. She walked over without saying a word and hugged me. "We'll find another client." And we did. Eventually. But that pattern repeated itself. Every time success felt within reach, something unexpected happened. An investor decided to back out. A supplier suddenly doubled its prices. A shipment was delayed. A contract was postponed. Every obstacle cost us another few months. Then another. Then another. Meanwhile, life refused to pause. Our friends started buying larger homes. Some welcomed their first children. Others celebrated promotions and anniversaries with vacations we could only dream about. Whenever we attended those celebrations, Chloe smiled politely. But during the drive home, she became quieter. One evening, She stared out the passenger window as our old beige sedan rolled through the city. Emily and Daniel just bought a house. I'm happy for them. So am I. A few minutes later, she asked softly, "Do you ever wonder when it'll be our turn?" I glanced at her. "Every day." She nodded. "I just wanted to know." Months became years. I worked harder than ever. Sometimes 14 hours a day. Sometimes 16. Not because I loved being away from home, because every delay made me feel responsible. Every lost contract felt personal. I kept telling myself, one more project, one more breakthrough, one more opportunity. Everything would change. One Friday evening, Chloe had prepared my favorite dinner. Candles covered the table. Soft music played in the background. I looked around in confusion. Did I forget something? She smiled. Our 4th wedding anniversary. The words hit me like a punch. I looked at my watch, then at my phone. I had spent the entire day inside a meeting with potential investors. I hadn't even remembered the date. "I'm so sorry." She forced a smile. "I know." We sat down together. Neither of us touched the food. After several minutes, she quietly asked, "James, when was the last time we had dinner without your phone ringing?" I looked at the table. I honestly couldn't remember. The silence inside our home slowly grew louder than arguments ever could. We weren't fighting. We were drifting. I'd leave before sunrise, come home after dark. She'd already be asleep on the couch. The next morning, we'd repeat the same routine. Sometimes entire days passed with nothing more than, "Good morning. See you tonight. I'm tired. Good night." We were living in the same house, but no longer sharing the same life. One rainy evening, I found Chloe sitting on the front porch. She wasn't crying. She was simply watching the rain. I sat beside her. Neither of us spoke for almost 5 minutes. Finally, she broke the silence. "James, I miss you. I'm right here." She slowly shook her head. "No, you come home every night, but you haven't really been here for a long time." Those words stayed with me, because I knew she wasn't trying to hurt me. She was telling me the truth. A few weeks later, I came home carrying exciting news. "We're finally close." She looked up from the kitchen. "What do you mean?" "I had a meeting today. It went really well. If everything works out, this could change everything." For a brief second, I saw the same hopeful woman I'd married. She smiled. Then she asked the question I wasn't prepared for. "James, how many times have you said that?" I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. She wasn't mocking me. She genuinely wanted an answer. I just didn't have one. She walked over and took both of my hands. "I still love you." My heart lifted. Then she whispered the sentence that shattered it. "But I don't recognize our life anymore." I felt my chest tighten. She continued, "I don't blame you for chasing your dream. I blame us for losing each other while you chased it." Neither of us cried. Neither of us shouted. We simply stood there, holding hands, realizing that love alone wasn't fixing what time had quietly broken. A week later, she placed a large envelope on the kitchen table. I looked down, then slowly opened it. The first page read, "Petition for dissolution of marriage." I looked back at Chloe. Her eyes were already full of tears. "Is this really what you want?" She closed her eyes for a moment, then answered with heartbreaking honesty, "No." A tear rolled down her cheek. "It's what I think I need." I lowered my head. For the first time since starting my company, I felt completely defeated. Not because I had lost a contract, not because I had lost money, but because I was about to lose the woman who had once promised to wait forever. For nearly an hour, neither of us touched the divorce papers. They sat between us on the kitchen table like they didn't belong there. Outside, rain tapped softly against the windows. Inside, the silence was unbearable. Finally, I looked up. "Can we still fix this?" Chloe lowered her eyes. "I've been asking myself that question for months." "Then don't leave." A tear rolled down her cheek. "I don't want to leave you, James." "Then stay." She slowly shook her head. "I can't keep waiting for a future that never seems to arrive." I reached across the table and took her hand. It will happen. You've said that before. This time is different. She gave me the saddest smile I'd ever seen. I believe that you believe it. But I don't know if I can keep believing it too. Those words hurt more than anger ever could. Because they were honest. Over the following weeks, we met with lawyers. We divided our belongings. Neither of us argued over furniture. Neither of us fought over money. The process was painfully respectful. Somehow, that made it hurt even more. One afternoon, our attorney slid the final documents across the conference table. He looked at both of us. Once these are signed, there is no going back. Neither of us reached for the pen immediately. I looked at Chloe. She looked exhausted. Not angry, not cold, just exhausted. The lawyer quietly excused himself to give us a moment alone. For nearly a minute, neither of us spoke. Then Chloe whispered, "I never imagined we'd end up here." Neither did I. She looked down at her wedding ring. Slowly, she removed it. She placed it on the table. The soft sound of the ring touching the wood echoed through the room. "I'll always be grateful for the years we had." My throat tightened. I thought we'd have a lifetime. So did I. She looked at me one last time. "I hope one day you build everything you've dreamed about." I managed a faint smile. "I wish you'd stayed long enough to see it." She closed her eyes. For a second, I thought she might change her mind. Instead, she picked up the pen, signed her name, then slid the papers toward me. My hand wouldn't move. The signature line blurred as my eyes filled with tears. The life we'd built together, the promises we'd made inside that old beige sedan, the dreams we'd whispered on quiet Sunday drives. Everything came down to one signature. I finally picked up the pen, signed my name. And just like that, James Smith and Chloe Clark were no longer husband and wife. She stood first. "So, I guess this is goodbye." I nodded. "I guess it is." For a brief moment, we simply looked at each other. Then she stepped forward and hugged me. Not as my wife, just as someone who had once known every part of me. "I really do hope you're happy someday. You too." She walked toward the office door. Her hand rested on the handle. She turned back one last time. "Take care of yourself, James." "You too, Chloe." Then she left. The door closed softly behind her, and the quiet that followed was louder than any argument we'd ever had. The first few weeks after the divorce were the hardest of my life. The house felt unfamiliar. Her favorite coffee mug was gone. Her books no longer sat on the shelf. The second pillow on the bed remained untouched. Every room reminded me of someone who wasn't there anymore. Some nights, I sat inside the old beige sedan parked in the driveway, not because I wanted to drive anywhere, but because that was where we'd shared some of our happiest conversations. I could almost hear her laughing. Almost. Giving up crossed my mind more than once. Not just the company, everything. But every morning, I'd remember something my father once told me before handing me the keys to that old sedan. A man's character isn't measured by how he celebrates success. It's measured by what he does after life knocks him down. So I kept going. Not because I stopped hurting, because quitting wouldn't bring Chloe back. 3 months later, everything began to change. A manufacturing company I'd been pursuing for almost 2 years finally agreed to a meeting. Unlike the dozens before them, they listened. They asked questions. They requested a second meeting, then a third. For the first time in years, I walked out of a conference room feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. I didn't celebrate. I'd learned not to celebrate too early. But quietly, I allowed myself to believe that maybe, just maybe, the breakthrough I'd been chasing all those years was finally within reach. I had no idea that, only a few months later, I'd receive an invitation to the Harrison Foundation Charity Gala, or that the woman who once promised to spend her entire life beside me would be standing in that very parking lot, laughing at the same old beige sedan that had carried our love story from the very beginning. The invitation arrived on a quiet Tuesday morning. I almost ignored it. Between supplier invoices, engineering drawings, and contract revisions, another envelope on my desk hardly seemed important. But this one was different. The paper was thicker. The envelope carried an elegant silver seal. Across the front were 5 simple words: The Harrison Foundation Charity Gala. I opened it carefully. Inside was a handwritten note. Mr. James Smith, it would be our honor to welcome you as our distinguished guest this Saturday evening. We hope you will accept our invitation. Sincerely, William Harrison. I read it twice. Then a third time. For almost 6 years, I had dreamed of meeting William Harrison. He had built one of the largest industrial groups in the country from nothing more than a rented warehouse and a handful of employees. Long before I started my own company, I had read every interview he had ever given. Whenever people asked me who inspired me, his name was always my answer. I folded the letter carefully and slipped it back into the envelope. For the first time in months, I smiled. Saturday arrived sooner than I expected. The entire city seemed alive. Luxury cars filled downtown streets. Television crews gathered outside the Grand Wellington Hotel. Business leaders from across the country stepped onto the red carpet while photographers called their names. Inside my garage, everything was quiet. The brand new black Mercedes-Benz G-Wagon sat beneath soft lighting, spotless and untouched. Only 3 people knew I had purchased it the week before. The dealership had insisted on delivering it earlier. I refused. I'll pick it up after the gala. The sales manager sounded confused. Sir, are you sure? I am, he laughed politely. As you wish. I walked past the G-Wagon without touching it. Instead, my eyes settled on the old beige sedan. The faded paint hadn't changed. Neither had the cracked headlight, or the worn steering wheel, or the tiny scratch Chloe had accidentally made with her wedding ring years earlier while reaching for the radio. I gently ran my fingers across the hood. You've carried me through everything. The engine started on the second try. Just like always. 40 minutes later, the Grand Wellington Hotel came into view. Luxury vehicles formed a long line outside the entrance. Valets hurried from one car to another. Guests stepped onto the red carpet wearing designer suits and evening gowns. As my old sedan rolled toward the circular driveway, heads immediately turned. One man frowned. Another quietly laughed. A young couple looked at each other before whispering something I couldn't hear. None of it surprised me. I had seen those reactions before. The sedan simply didn't belong among cars worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. I slowly stopped beside the entrance. The engine rattled once before falling silent. A young valet approached. His smile was professional. Until he looked at the car, then his expression changed. Good evening, sir. Good evening. He hesitated before reaching for the door. Will you be attending the Harrison Charity Gala? I will. He glanced toward another valet, almost asking for confirmation. Then he nodded politely. Of course, sir. I stepped out, straightened my navy blue suit, buttoned the jacket, then handed him the keys. He looked down at them, back at me, then toward the sedan. I'll take good care of it. I know you will. Before he could drive away, a familiar voice echoed across the entrance. James? My heart recognized it before my eyes did. I slowly turned. Standing halfway up the marble staircase, wearing an elegant crimson evening gown, was Chloe. Time seemed to stop. For a brief second, neither of us spoke. She looked exactly as I remembered. Confident. Beautiful. Poised. Then, her eyes drifted past me, toward the beige sedan. A smile slowly spread across her face. Not a warm smile. Not one of surprise. The kind of smile that appears when someone believes they've just been proven right. She laughed. Not quietly. Not to herself. Loud enough for nearby conversations to stop. James? She looked from me to the sedan again. You actually drove that here? Several guests turned around. A businessman standing near the entrance chuckled. His wife glanced at the old sedan and smiled. Within seconds, more eyes shifted toward us. Chloe descended the marble steps gracefully. Each click of her heels echoed across the driveway. When she reached the sedan, she slowly walked around it, examining every scratch, every dent, every faded patch of paint. She lightly tapped the hood with one finger. "I can't believe this thing is still running." A few guests laughed. One man pulled out his phone. Another whispered, "This should be interesting." Chloe looked back at me. "I honestly thought you'd have replaced it by now." She smiled. "I guess some things never change." The crowd around us grew larger. People sensed entertainment, and entertainment always attracts an audience. I simply stood there, hands in my pockets, watching her, calm, patient, because unlike everyone else gathered around that driveway, I already knew how the evening was going to end. For several seconds, nobody said anything. The crowd simply waited. People love public humiliation almost as much as they love public success, and at that moment, they believed they were about to witness the first one. Chloe folded her arms. "So, James, I guess your company still hasn't taken off." I smiled politely. "My company's doing just fine." She raised an eyebrow. "Really?" Her eyes drifted back toward the old sedan. "Then why are you still driving this?" A few guests laughed again. She slowly shook her head. "You always amazed me. You could convince yourself of anything. You kept saying, 'Just give me a little more time.'" She looked around at the people watching. "I waited 6 years. I couldn't wait forever." Nobody interrupted her. To everyone standing there, she sounded reasonable. Even I couldn't blame her for saying it. She wasn't lying. She had waited, longer than most people would have. I simply nodded. "I know." That answer surprised her. "You know?" "I do." She frowned. "I expected you to argue. I've spent enough years arguing with life. I don't need to argue with you." For the first time, she seemed unsure of herself. Before either of us could say another word, a low rumble echoed through the driveway. Heads turned toward the hotel entrance. A large enclosed transport truck slowly rolled through the front gate. It carried the unmistakable logo of a luxury automobile dealership. Guests stepped aside as the truck stopped only a few yards from where we stood. Someone whispered, "Who's getting a delivery here?" Another guest smiled. "Must be one of tonight's VIPs." The driver climbed out. He checked a clipboard, then opened the rear doors. Hydraulic ramps slowly lowered toward the pavement. Silence spread across the entrance. A brand new black Mercedes-Benz G-Wagon slowly rolled into view. Its glossy finish reflected the hotel lights like a mirror. Several guests instinctively pulled out their phones. Even the valet stopped working to watch. One man quietly muttered, "That has to be worth over $200,000. Another answered, "Whoever owns it is doing very well." The driver parked the SUV beside the red carpet. He climbed out carrying a small leather folder. Without looking at anyone else, he walked directly toward me. Every eye followed him. He stopped only a step away. "Good evening, Mr. James Smith." I smiled. "Good evening. It's an honor to finally deliver your vehicle." He opened the leather folder. "Congratulations once again on your purchase." He removed 2 key fobs. Placed them gently into my hand. Everything has been prepared exactly as requested. For a heartbeat, the entire driveway became completely silent. Nobody laughed. Nobody whispered. Nobody moved. Chloe stared at the keys in my hand as though her mind refused to accept what her eyes were seeing. The driver continued, "Thank you for asking us to delay delivery until after your business meetings. We hope you enjoy your new Mercedes-Benz G-Wagon." I nodded. "Thank you." He shook my hand, then walked away. The silence somehow became even heavier. A few seconds earlier, those same people had been laughing at my old sedan. Now, they couldn't even find words. I pressed the unlock button. The G-Wagon's headlights flashed. The mirrors unfolded. A soft electronic chime echoed through the driveway. Several guests gasped. One man quietly lowered the phone he'd been using to record my humiliation. Another simply whispered, "No way." I looked toward the valet holding the keys to my old sedan. He seemed frozen. I walked over and smiled. "Thank you for taking care of her." He quickly handed me the old keys. "My pleasure, sir." I slipped them into my pocket beside the new ones. Both sets mattered to me. One represented where I was going. The other reminded me where I had started. I turned back toward Chloe. She hadn't moved. The confidence that had filled her face only moments earlier had disappeared. She looked from the G-Wagon to me, then back to the old beige sedan. She struggled to speak. When did this happen? I answered honestly. Not overnight. It took years. Her eyes slowly filled with regret. So, you finally made it. I smiled gently. I never stopped trying. She looked down for a moment. I wish. She couldn't finish the sentence. I already knew the ending. I know. At that moment, the hotel's grand entrance doors opened. A distinguished man in his 60s stepped outside, accompanied by several board members and event organizers. The conversations around us stopped once again. The man looked directly at me. A warm smile spread across his face. James. It was William Harrison himself. He walked past dozens of influential guests without acknowledging anyone else first. When he reached me, he extended both hands. I've been looking forward to meeting you all evening. He shook my hand firmly. Everyone inside is waiting. I'd like to introduce you personally. Then he glanced toward the old beige sedan. He smiled. I see you still drove the car you told me about. I laughed softly. I couldn't leave her behind. William nodded with admiration. Never forget where you came from. It's one of the reasons I respect you. He gestured toward the ballroom. Come on. Tonight, everyone deserves to know the man who built one of the fastest-growing engineering companies in the country. I took one last look at the old beige sedan, then at Chloe. She wasn't looking at the G-Wagon anymore. She was looking at me. Not with pride, not with anger, but with the heartbreaking realization that she hadn't left a man without a future. She had left just before his future arrived, without another word. I walked beside William Harrison through the grand doors. This time, no one laughed. William Harrison placed a hand on my shoulder before turning toward the crowd. Ladies and gentlemen. His voice carried effortlessly through the grand ballroom. I'd like your attention for just a moment. Conversations slowly faded. The orchestra stopped playing. Hundreds of guests turned toward the stage. William smiled. Every year, we invite someone whose story reminds us why perseverance will always outlast privilege. He looked at me. This year's guest isn't here because he inherited a fortune. He isn't here because he was lucky. And he certainly isn't here because success came easily. A large screen behind the stage came to life. Photographs appeared one after another. The first showed a tiny office with peeling walls. The second showed 3 employees gathered around a folding table. The third showed an old warehouse. Then came photographs of factories, construction sites, engineering teams, production facilities. One project after another. The audience watched in complete silence. William continued. 6 years ago, this man founded his company with little more than determination, technical expertise, and a belief that problems exist to be solved. He faced setbacks that would have convinced most people to quit. Investors walked away, contracts collapsed, projects were delayed, but he refused to abandon his vision. The final image appeared on the screen. A modern headquarters bearing the words, Smith Industrial Solutions. Beneath it appeared another line, one of America's fastest-growing engineering companies. A wave of surprised murmurs swept across the ballroom. William looked proudly at me. Tonight, it is my privilege to welcome Mr. James Smith. The room erupted into applause. People rose from their seats one after another. Within seconds, the entire ballroom was standing. The applause echoed through the hall. I looked toward the back of the room. Standing near the entrance was Chloe. She wasn't clapping. She simply stood there, staring at me with tears slowly filling her eyes. Not because of the G-Wagon, not because of the applause, but because she was finally seeing the future I had spent years trying to describe. William handed me the award. It was heavier than I expected. Engraved across the front were the words, Entrepreneur of the Year. He leaned closer and whispered, You earned every bit of this. I nodded. Thank you. After the ceremony ended, Guests surrounded me. Investors asked for meetings. Business owners requested introductions. Reporters waited for interviews. Nearly an hour passed before the crowd finally began to thin. As I stepped outside for some fresh air, I heard footsteps behind me. "James!" I turned around. Chloe stood a few feet away. The confidence she'd worn earlier that evening had disappeared. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, she looked down and quietly said, "I'm sorry." I didn't answer immediately. She took a slow breath. "I wasn't wrong to be afraid, but I was wrong to stop believing in you." Tears rolled down her cheeks. I kept thinking success would happen tomorrow, and when tomorrow kept moving, I convinced myself it would never come. She looked into my eyes. I should have stayed. There was no anger left inside me, only peace. I smiled gently. "You made the decision you believed was right. But I still hurt you." "You did. I'm sorry." "I know." She wiped away another tear. "Is there any chance?" She couldn't finish the sentence. I understood anyway. I slowly shook my head. "Chloe, you didn't leave because I had no future. You left because my future hadn't arrived yet." She closed her eyes. Those words hurt. Because they were true. She nodded once. "I'll regret that for the rest of my life." I wished her well. "And I truly hope you find the happiness you're looking for." She gave me one final smile. "Congratulations, James." Then she quietly walked away. I watched until she disappeared into the crowd. A few minutes later, I reached the parking lot. The brand new black G-Wagon waited under the lights. Just a few spaces away, the old beige sedan remained exactly where I'd left it. I walked past the G-Wagon first, stopped beside the old sedan, and gently rested my hand on its faded hood. I smiled. "You never embarrassed me. This world just never understood you." That old car had carried two young dreamers on their first date. It had taken us to our wedding. It had witnessed our happiest memories. It had carried me through failure after failure without ever giving up, just like I hadn't. I looked at the valet. "Can you arrange for both vehicles to be delivered to my house?" He smiled. "Both of them, sir?" "Yes." He glanced at the old sedan. "You don't want to sell it?" I smiled. "No. Some things become priceless long before they become valuable." I climbed into the G-Wagon. The engine started with a quiet purr. As I drove away, I looked once more in the rearview mirror. The old beige sedan stood beneath the hotel lights, no longer as a symbol of failure, but as a reminder that every extraordinary journey begins with something ordinary, and sometimes, the people who laugh at your starting point never get to see how incredible your destination becomes.